10 years. We've been beating the hell out of this Harbor Freight trailer on our property for 10 years now. In addition to allegedly running moonshine, it's suffered through moving rocks, boulders, dirt, logs, firewood, and even hauling sap for maple syrup production. We've rewarded that hard work by storing it outside its entire life. Other than checking tire pressure and adding grease to the hubs on occasion, it's never been serviced, washed, or shown the least bit of affection or love. So after stoically enduring a 10-year borderline abusive relationship, it's time to man up and show this workhorse some love. Why? Well, I think it's earned it. It's the least we can do. Hey, I'm Tori. Today we're going to review what this Harbor Freight trailer looks like after 10 years of heavy off-road use on our property. We've already stripped the old wood deck off so we can have unfettered access to the frame for cleaning, inspection, teardown, and eventual rebuilding. Before we begin with that though, here's the specific model information that you might find helpful to know. This is the Harbor Freight Haulmaster Utility Trailer, model number 58702, 62645, or 62665. Like I said, this thing is 10 years old and I'm not sure what the original model number is, given that the Harbor Freight website has multiple model numbers listed. It's probably fair to assume it's gone through some changes over the years. This trailer sports a 48-inch long by 40.5-inch wide deck, a total length of 78 inches from the back of the deck to the tongue, with a tongue length of 30 inches, and is equipped with a 1 7/8 inch coupler. Its maximum width, fender to fender, is about 54 inches. It's rated at a load capacity of 1,090 pounds with a leaf spring suspension attached to a fixed axle with greasable hubs via inboard mounted zerks. Its ground clearance measures in at 9.5 inches at the bottom of the axle. It is a painted steel deck, which includes front, back, and side stake pockets, measuring in at 3.5 inches by about 7/8 inches. The frame sports numerous 7/16 inch diameter holes for mounting a wood deck and other accessories. It is equipped with 4 lug wheels mounted on 4.8 by 12 tires, which are covered with these sheet metal fenders. All right, so inspection's gonna go a lot smoother if we take the time to clean the frame off of all this baked on, caked on mud and debris. And since it's cold as balls in Michigan right now, I'm gonna forego the hose and use the wire brush to do it. All right, so got it cleaned off, and of interest, in addition to a large pile of dirt and lots of red paint flakes, I found a 10 mil wrench, which is a huge bonus. Found a buck knife that was taped to the bottom of the axle and I apparently had forgotten about. Found some copper birdshot, which most likely stems from an incident with my neighbor during the pandemic lockdowns. A few shell casings and shot shells, and oddly, a dried starfish and a rooster spur. All right, so with that out of the way, we're gonna start walking around this thing and doing our base inspection. So pretty clear these fenders are beat up. They are bent, tweaked, corroded, not terribly bad, just surface rust, and the paint's very faded. Well, the front tongue is straight, and other than suffering from a lot of paint fade and a little bit of corrosion, some nicks and gouges, probably from a drunken jackknife or the issue with my neighbor I referenced earlier, looks to be in pretty good shape. The coupler appears to be in good shape and it functions fine. All right, so we're at the rear now, and it looks like these rear stake pockets have had some deformation, a little bit of bend and mid-span in this thin section of metal. It's not terrible though. Well, all the suspension bolts holding the axle to the leaf springs are in place. And other than just some basic light corrosion, everything looks to be intact and okay. The cross members on the chassis appear pretty good. They were protected by a wood deck over the top of them, so they seem to have less paint issues than the other parts of the frame. Otherwise, it looks like all the original fasteners are in place, and other than the stake pockets, the frame itself doesn't appear to be too beat up. Okay, so the last check I'm going to do is to check corner to corner distance to see that the chassis is more or less square. And I can't get this tape to stick on the corner of the chassis, so I'm going to go off of that bolt. All right, so this side I've got 61.5 inches, and on this side I've got 62 inches. So there's a 1/2 inch tweak in this frame, making one end longer than the other. And for all I know and don't recall anymore is how tightly these joints went together when I assembled it. So it just might need a slight shifting, because I don't get the impression anything else on the deck is tweaked. All right, so let's get this thing up in the air. Let's get these tires off. With a 21 mil. All right, so fenders are next. We're gonna get a 16 mil for one end of the bolt, and a 17 for the nut. And there's 2 bolts that hold that to the chassis. That's it. All right, now we're going to drop the suspension. Straighten these cutters. Caddis. Well, that was the rear. Now we're doing the front. We've got a 21 wrench and a 22 socket. Same for the back spring. So it's difficult to get a good shot of all the fasteners when they're installed on the frame. So here is the assembly drawing from the Harbor Freight Owner's Manual showing you the fasteners that I am removing to break this frame down. All right, so we're using a 16 mil wrench for the M10 bolts and a 17 mil socket for the M10 lock nuts. All right, so on the tongue, the fasteners are recessed down within the C channel, making them difficult to get at. So I'm not going to film this. This is a little too hard to get a good shot while disassembling it, but there's 4 of them. 2 on the front frame and 2 in the mid-span frame. All right, so the frame is apart, and it looks like on the bottom, this is upside down now, with the tongue facing towards the front. And it looks like, to me, like the bottom side is actually in more or less better shape than the top side. There's still signs of paint coming off in a few spots, but I would have expected it to be worse because that's a closer contact to the ground because it sits outside. I've straight edged everything, and the only other problem I've seen is on the rear crossmember piece. You can see there's some deformation on the edges, which most likely is backing into trees and structures and such like that. So it's really not terrible, but there is some signs of taking a beating, but I'm not at all surprised by that. All right, so last thing on the frame is to get that coupler off. And like an idiot, I rested the axle on top of it. I don't expect any problems with it, just wanted to get it apart. It'll be easier to clean the frame up and get this coupler cleaned up too and lubricated. Yeah, it's got some light surface rust on it, nothing terrible. To be expected. More cracked paint, not a surprise that water could get under there and just sit there, so. But otherwise, nothing major structurally on the frame, which is great news. Okay, so looking closer at the axle, springs definitely have some light surface rust on them, not a big deal. There's a little bit of mud packed up in that frame, but overall, I think it looks pretty damn good. So I think next step is to pop the hubs. I mean, it spins, it's not. And this one feels a little tighter than the other side, but they spin, which is what you want, obviously. So I think I'll pull the hubs off next and take a look at the bearings and the seals. I don't see any signs of grease getting out except around the Zerk, where God knows I'm sloppy enough at that. So I think they're okay. So let's do that. All right, plenty of grease in there. No water came out. This one spins relatively well, like I said, but be interesting to see what the other side's like. Well, it certainly spins easier with, I don't know what I took off there, maybe less than a quarter of a turn, maybe an eighth, hard to say. Wasn't really paying attention. Not saying I'd change the preload much, but just noting it. Ooh, there's some grit right there. Huh. Hub dust seal was on there tight. This inner seal looks mostly okay. Like I said, there's no grease out here, so I think it was mostly okay. So let's flip it around and do the other side. That's got a grayish color to it. Almost looks like maybe water got in there. It's not as dark as the other one. See if that's more than finger tight. Yep. Yeah, it's definitely stiffer on this side. I mean, it's not like it's going to kill my fuel economy or anything to leave that much preload in it, but it feels a little stiff, so I think we'll play with it on reassembly. Don't feel any grit. Seal's definitely got gunk on it, but it's not grease, it's dirt. And it's possibly there's a little grease in there, but I think that just comes from sloppy zerking, which I'm definitely guilty of. May it just be that the preload was slightly more on this side than the other. And I don't feel any grit on this side, so yeah, maybe a little bit, just a little bit though. So those seals are good, but we'll probably go ahead and do the right thing and change them out. The axles themselves feel good. I don't feel any nicks or grooves on any of them. Yeah, this other side definitely's got grit on it. So, all right, so there's the hubs. Look to have done a adequate job staying sealed and everything. Maybe just some variability in the preload. So we'll change that up so they spin a little easier on us in the future. All right, so there you have it. Partial cleaning, full disassembly, and an initial inspection reveal that not a lot has gone wrong after 10 years of use. So let's do a quick summary. Dents on the stake pockets and rear frame, paint fade and chipping with some surface rust. Fasteners are rusted and failure isn't likely, but we're going to change them out regardless. Hubs appear good with a slight difference in drag side to side, but pretty minor. Dry rot on one tire, and the fenders are a little banged up. So that's it. That's not too bad, in my opinion, for 10 years of heavy use and abuse and neglect. Are there better trailers out there for off-road / homesteading activities? I'm sure there probably are. But I doubt they're in the $400 range, so I still think this thing is a pretty damn good deal. Definitely worth the time and effort and cost in restoring it to its former glory. All right, so that is it for today. Next video is going to be on cleaning and painting this frame up, rebuilding the axle with new grease seals and bearings on the hubs, and reassembling the whole thing. And then after that, we'll do a video on reskinning it as well. So thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.